In the shadows of the underworld, where blood and silence intertwine, there lived mob bosses who didn't just kill but spread terror that shook entire nations. Who were they? And what chilling secrets did these cold-blooded legends carry with them to the grave? In the world of the Mafia, where shadows rule and blood is the only language, the name Matteo Messina Denaro echoed like a curse. Born in 1962 in Castelvetrano, he was no ordinary child. From the very beginning, Matteo was forged in the furnace of crime, molded by his father Francesco Don Ciccio Messina Denaro, a feared boss of the Sicilian Cosa Nostra. At 14, he already knew how to wield a gun. At 18, he stained his hands with blood to prove himself. But Denaro was more than a killer. He became the embodiment of absolute ruthlessness. In 1992, when justice in Italy found its strongest voice in Judge Giovanni Falcone, the Mafia decided to silence him with a devastating bomb, and Matteo played a central role in orchestrating the carnage. The explosion did not just kill, it sent shockwaves of terror across Sicily. Yet his darkest crime was still to come, the abduction of Santino Di Matteo's 11-year-old son. The boy was held captive for 779 harrowing days, tortured, and in the end, strangled and dissolved in acid. No trace remained, only the chilling memory of unimaginable cruelty. It was Denaro's signature, proof that his brutality knew no limits. In 1993, a string of bombings in Rome, Florence, and Milan added to his reign of terror. 10 lives were claimed, 93 more were wounded, and all of Italy trembled under Mafia's iron grip. With arrogant pride, Denaro once boasted, "I filled a cemetery all by myself." Then he vanished. For 3 decades, Matteo became a ghost. While Italy hunted him, he lived in luxury, video games, women, wealth, shielded by the sacred code of omertà. Police raids came close, but never close enough. He was diabolic, the uncatchable phantom, until 2023, when death itself cornered him. Stricken with cancer, Denaro was finally captured in a Palermo clinic. Later that year, in September, he died in prison, carrying every Mafia secret with him to the grave. But his shadow still lingers over Sicily, a grim reminder that the Mafia does not simply kill. It leaves behind eternal scars of fear and silence. From the impoverished village of Corleone, where harsh soil and unforgiving life shaped hardened men, emerged one of the most terrifying figures in Mafia history, Salvatore Toto Riina. Born in 1930, his childhood was soaked in blood when a bomb explosion killed his father and younger brother, leaving scars that never healed. That tragedy turned young Riina into a boy who saw death not as horror, but as inevitability. By the age of 19, he had already killed and been imprisoned. Yet when Riina walked out of prison, he was no longer just another criminal. He had become a soldier of darkness. Alongside Bernardo Provenzano and Calogero Bagarella, he elevated the Corleone clan from a poor, overlooked faction into the most powerful force within Cosa Nostra. In the 1980s, Riina unleashed the Second Mafia War, a blood-soaked era of slaughter. Hundreds, perhaps even thousands, were murdered. Rivals, politicians, police officers, judges. Riina refused to remain in the shadows like his predecessors. Instead, he flaunted his brutality, orchestrating public assassinations that turned Sicily into a battlefield. His reign of terror climaxed with the assassinations of judges Giovanni Falcone and Paolo Borsellino in 1992. The bombs that tore through their cars didn't just kill, they shattered Italy's faith in justice, shaking the entire nation to its core. And Riina's savagery didn't end with his enemies. He targeted their families too. Sons, brothers, nephews of Tommaso Buscetta were slaughtered in cold blood, leaving widows and orphans in his wake. Riina's madness extended beyond vendettas. He ordered train bombings that killed dozens of innocent civilians. His rampage stripped away the last line between mafia crime and sheer terrorism. It was this merciless savagery that earned him the nickname the Beast. But in his arrogance, Riina ignited the fury that would end him. Outraged citizens filled the streets of Italy, demanding vengeance. The government launched an unprecedented crackdown, mobilizing every resource to hunt him down. After 23 years as a fugitive, Riina was finally captured in 1993 at a Palermo villa. Even behind bars, his name carried the weight of terror. Riina remained a haunting presence until his death in 2017, departing this world with the same cruel smile that had defined his life. Yet the scars of his reign, blood, fear, and shattered families still linger across Sicily, a chilling reminder of the monster who once ruled from Corleone. In the gritty streets of Brooklyn, where shadows concealed unspeakable horrors, one name sent chills through both mobsters and law enforcement alike: Roy Albert DeMeo. Born in 1940 to an Italian immigrant family, his childhood seemed unremarkable, yet the path he chose led straight into the heart of organized crime. Starting with loan sharking, Roy soon caught the attention of Anthony Gaggi of the Gambino crime family. From that moment, the gates of hell swung open. DeMeo was not just a killer, he was an artisan of death. He created the infamous DeMeo crew, a band of cold-blooded assassins. Their headquarters, the Gemini Lounge, became nothing less than a slaughterhouse. There, they perfected the Gemini method. The victim was shot in the head, stabbed in the heart to prevent blood from spilling, then dragged into the bathroom for dismemberment. Each body was neatly packaged in plastic bags and discarded like garbage. DeMeo's brutality spared no one, not even those closest to him. He executed Chris Rosenberg, his longtime protege and friend, after a dangerous business blunder with Cuban traffickers. Innocents were not safe either. Dominic Ruggi, a college student mistaken for a Cuban hitman, was gunned down without hesitation. Blood from the innocent and the guilty alike soaked into Brooklyn's streets, turning them into a realm of nightmares. The horror reached its zenith with the murder of Andre Katz, a young mechanic who dared expose the crew's secrets. Katz was abducted, tortured, stabbed, decapitated, and his remains crushed beyond recognition. His body, like many others, was dumped at Brooklyn's Fountain Avenue landfill, where human remains blended with refuse, erased from memory as if they never existed. But evil cannot rule forever. As the FBI and NYPD closed in, paranoia consumed DeMeo. He contemplated faking his own death to escape justice. Fate, however, had other plans. On January 10, 1983, Roy DeMeo vanished after a crew meeting. 10 days later, police discovered his abandoned Cadillac. Inside the trunk lay his frozen corpse, riddled with bullets. The butcher had finally been butchered. The death of Roy DeMeo closed one of the bloodiest chapters in American Mafia history. Yet the Gemini method endures in infamy, a chilling reminder that in the dark corners of Brooklyn once prowled a man who turned killing into an art form of terror. In the history of the American Mafia, few names embody limitless ambition and cold-blooded betrayal quite like Vito Genovese. Born in 1897 in Italy, Vito emigrated to the United States with his family at the age of 15. On the chaotic streets of Little Italy, he quickly learned a brutal rule: the strong survive, the weak perish. And Vito chose the path of power. Starting with petty thefts and loan sharking, he soon entered the Mafia world under Joe Masseria. But Genovese was different, calculated, ruthless, and willing to betray anyone if it meant climbing higher. In 1930, during the Castellamarese War, he proved his cruelty by taking part in the assassination of Gaetano Reina, a supposed ally suspected of betrayal. Not long after, Genovese, alongside Lucky Luciano and Albert Anastasia, orchestrated the death of Masseria himself. The blood of Joe the Boss stained the Mafia chessboard, clearing the way for Luciano's rise. Yet loyalty was never in Genovese's nature. When Luciano was deported to Italy, Vito wasted no time plotting to seize the throne of Cosa Nostra. His ambitions stretched beyond New York. Genovese sought to dominate international narcotics trafficking, extending his influence across borders. In 1957, he organized the infamous Appalachian Meeting, summoning dozens of mob bosses from across the United States. What was meant to be a crowning moment of his reign turned into disaster when police raided the gathering. The sight of powerful dons scrambling through fields to escape became a public humiliation, exposing the Mafia to the world. Greed drove Genovese to ruin. In 1959, he was sentenced to 15 years in prison on drug trafficking charges. Even behind bars, he tried to maintain control over his family, but his empire crumbled. The once mighty boss spent his final years in the shadows of a cell, dying in 1969, his dream of ruling Cosa Nostra buried with him. Vito Genovese's legacy remains one of betrayal, unchecked ambition, and ultimate downfall. He is proof that in the Mafia, the higher one reaches for the throne, the harder the inevitable fall into the abyss. In the blood-soaked chronicles of America's underworld, few names inspire more terror than Albert Anastasia. the man branded with chilling titles, the Lord High Executioner, the Mad Hatter, and the embodiment of Mafia ruthlessness. Born in 1902 in Calabria, Italy, Anastasia fled to the United States with his brothers in 1919. On the Brooklyn waterfront, he began as a longshoreman, but violence coursed through his veins. In 1921, he was sentenced to death for murder, yet, as if fate shielded him, witnesses mysteriously vanished. Anastasia walked free, convinced he was destined for a life of killing. Backed by Lucky Luciano and Frank Costello, Anastasia rose as one of the most feared leaders of Murder Inc., the Mafia's notorious assassination squad. Under his command, thousands of murders were carried out in the shadows. To Anastasia, killing was not simply a job, it was a cold, perfected craft. Those who opposed him met dreadful ends. Morris Diamond, a Teamsters Union official, was eliminated on his orders. Peter Panto, a reformist union activist, disappeared, later found dead, bound and buried. Anastasia never forgave defiance. Every rebel became a corpse. His ambition drove him closer to the Mafia throne. After the mysterious disappearance of his boss, Vincent Mangano, Anastasia seized power, rebranding the family under his own name. But with power came madness. He was suspected of ordering the execution of Arnold Schuster, an innocent young man whose only crime was pointing out a fugitive bank robber. When Anastasia learned Schuster was cooperating with police, he coldly declared, "I can't stand squealers. Hit that guy." Schuster was gunned down in Brooklyn, a brazen message of terror. Anastasia's unchecked brutality terrified even his allies. In the end, betrayal awaited. On the morning of October 25, 1957, as Anastasia reclined in a barber's chair at the Park Sheraton Hotel, two gunmen stormed in. He lunged forward, trying to fight, but in the chaos, he struck only at his own reflection in the mirror. Bullets tore through him, leaving the feared executioner lifeless on the tiled floor. The death of Albert Anastasia closed one of the most savage chapters in Mafia history. Yet the legend of Murder Inc. and the haunting image of a mob lord dying in a barber's chair endure. A grim reminder that in the Mafia, even the Lord High Executioner cannot escape a bloody fate. In the history of American crime, if one name transcends all boundaries to become legend, it is Charles Lucky Luciano. He was not merely a boss, he was an architect, the man who transformed the Mafia from a fractured network into a global criminal empire. Born in 1897 in Sicily, young Salvatore Lucania arrived in America with his family in 1906. On the streets of New York's Lower East Side, Luciano quickly learned a harsh truth. You were either the prey or the predator. Dropping out of school at 14, he chose the streets as his classroom, and from there began the journey that would reshape the underworld. Unlike his fellow Italian immigrants who clung to old-world exclusivity, Luciano saw further. He forged an alliance with Meyer Lansky, a brilliant Jewish gangster, and recognized that true wealth lay in cross-ethnic cooperation. That vision set him apart from the older bosses, who were trapped in outdated codes of honor and pride. But Luciano's rise was written in blood. During the Castellamarese War, the bloody conflict between Joe Masseria and Salvatore Maranzano, Luciano played the role of the ultimate betrayer. Feigning loyalty, he secretly plotted. When Masseria was gunned down in a Coney Island restaurant, Luciano was the bait who lured him to his death. Months later, Maranzano, the self-proclaimed capo di tutti capi, fell in a hail of bullets and blades. Luciano had eliminated both rivals, paving the way for a new era. Instead of crowning himself absolute ruler, Luciano made a brilliant move. He created the Commission, a governing council uniting mafia families across America. There would be no single king, but rather a board of directors running organized crime like a corporation. Under Luciano's vision, the mafia entered an age of unprecedented stability, prosperity, and expansion. He pushed the syndicate into every lucrative field: bootlegging, gambling, prostitution, narcotics, docks, and unions. Under his reign, the mafia controlled billions, flowing from New York's gambling dens to the casinos of Las Vegas and the shores of Havana. People whispered, not a dime leaves New York without passing through Luciano's hands. Though convicted in 1936 on prostitution charges and later deported to Italy, Luciano's influence never truly faded. During World War II, he even cooperated with the U.S. government, using his networks to secure the docks and aid the Allied invasion of Sicily. Myth and reality blurred, painting Luciano as both criminal mastermind and shadowy patriot. His death in Naples in 1962 did not close his story. It cemented his legend. Luciano was not just a boss, he was the man who rewrote the rules. From a poor immigrant boy to the architect of the modern mafia, Luciano's tale is one of blood, betrayal, and brilliance. His name endures, forever a dark shadow cast over the history of global crime.